Imagine you're standing behind a machine gun on a tropical island in the middle of the night. Wave after wave of enemy soldiers are charging at you, screaming, firing, throwing grenades. Your position is being hammered by mortar fire. One by one, your fellow Marines are killed or wounded. Your gun jams. Your ammunition runs out. You're the last man standing between 3,000 Japanese soldiers and the Marines' most vital airfield in the Pacific. What do? If you're John Basilone, you repair that gun under fire. You run 150 yards through enemy territory to get more ammunition. You fire one machine gun until it glows red hot, then switch to another. For 3 days and nights, without food, without sleep, you hold that line. And when it's over, you've killed at least 38 enemy soldiers. You've saved Henderson Field. You've become the first enlisted Marine in World War II to receive the Medal of Honor. But here's the twist that makes this story truly heartbreaking. After earning America's highest honor, after being sent home as a hero, John Basilone demanded to go back to war. And that decision would cost him his life. Stay with me, because this is the story of Manila John Basilone, the only Marine in World War II to earn both the Medal of Honor and the Navy Cross, and what he did will make you redefine the meaning of courage. Chapter 1. The Boy from Raritan. November 4th, 1916, Buffalo, New York. A baby boy named John Basilone was born into an Italian immigrant family. His father, Salvatore Basilone, had immigrated from Naples, Italy, and worked as a tailor. His mother, Theodora Bengavenga, raised their 10 children in a cramped home filled with love but little money. John was the 6th of 10 children, 6 older and 4 younger siblings. Imagine the chaos, the noise, the constant struggle to feed that many mouths. Money was always tight. Luxuries were non-existent. But the Basilone family had something more important than money. They had each other. When John was just 2 years old, the family moved to Raritan, New Jersey, a small working-class town. This is where John grew up. This is where he became the man who would one day be called the greatest Marine of World War II. John attended St. Bernard Parochial School in Raritan. He was a decent student, not exceptional, but he made it through 8th grade. That was as far as his formal education went. At 15 years old, John Basilone dropped out of school to help support his family. He worked as a caddy at the local golf course, carrying bags for wealthy men who could afford to play while John's family scraped by. For a couple of years, John worked odd jobs trying to figure out what to do with his life. Then, at 18 years old, John Basilone made a decision that would change everything. He walked into an Army recruiting station and enlisted for a 3-year term. John Basilone was now a United States Marine. Chapter 2. Manila John and the Boxing Ring. In 1934, Private John Basilone completed basic training at Fort Jay, New York. Shortly after, he was transferred to the 31st Infantry Regiment and shipped to Manila in the Philippine Islands. The Philippines in the 1930s was a tropical paradise, an American territory filled with exotic sights, sounds, and experiences that a working-class kid from New Jersey had never imagined. John loved it. But what John Basilone really discovered in Manila was boxing. John had always been tough, scrappy, quick with his fists. In Manila, he became a boxer. And not just any boxer, he was good, really good. John Basilone went undefeated in his boxing matches. He won fight after fight, earning a reputation as a fierce competitor in the ring. His fellow soldiers started calling him Manila John because he wouldn't shut up about how great the Philippines were. He loved the islands, the people, the culture. Every story he told seemed to start with, "back in Manila." Even General Douglas MacArthur came to watch Manila John Basilone fight, That's how good he was. John spent 3 years in the Philippines, boxing, soldiering, and enjoying life. When his 3-year enlistment ended in 1937, John returned to the United States. He was honorably discharged from the Army and went to work as a truck driver in Reisterstown, Maryland. But civilian life didn't suit John Basilone. He missed the structure, the camaraderie, the sense of purpose that military life provided. He missed the uniform. On June 3, 1940, John Basilone made the decision that changed everything. He walked into a Marine Corps recruiting station and enlisted. John Basilone was now a United States Marine. Chapter 3. From Peacetime to War. John's timing couldn't have been worse, or better, depending on how you look at it. He joined the Marines in 1940 when America was still at peace, but the world was on fire. Hitler's Germany had conquered most of Europe. Japan was rampaging through China. War was coming to America. Everyone could feel it. John completed Marine boot camp at Parris Island, South Carolina, where drill instructors broke down civilians and built them back up as Marines. John excelled. The discipline, the physical training, the warrior ethos of the Marine Corps, it all clicked for him. Then came December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor, the Japanese surprise attack that killed over 2,400 Americans and brought the United States into World War II. John Basilone was ready to fight. By September 1942, John was a sergeant in Company C, 1st Battalion, 7th Marine Regiment, 1st Marine Division. His unit was preparing for one of the most important battles of the entire Pacific War. The target? Guadalcanal, a small island in the Solomon Islands chain. Most Americans had never heard of it, but Guadalcanal would become one of the bloodiest, most brutal battlefields of World War II. The Marines' mission was to capture Henderson Field, an airstrip the Japanese were building. Whoever controlled that airfield controlled the surrounding seas and skies. Henderson Field was the key to the entire Pacific campaign. On August 7, 1942, the Marines landed on Guadalcanal. The initial landing was relatively easy, catching the Japanese by surprise. The Marines quickly captured Henderson Field, but holding it would be a different story. Chapter 4. Hell in the Jungle. Guadalcanal was hell, pure, unfiltered hell. The island was covered in dense jungle. The heat was oppressive. Humidity approached 100%. Mosquitoes carried malaria and dengue fever. Soldiers contracted dysentery from contaminated water. Fungal infections ravaged their skin. Men lost weight, became gaunt, hollow-eyed. But far worse than the jungle were the Japanese. They were determined to retake Henderson Field at any cost. Wave after wave of Japanese troops attacked the Marines, often at night, screaming "Banzai!" and charging into American positions with suicidal bravery. John Basilone was assigned as a machine gun section leader. He commanded 2 heavy .30 caliber machine gun crews, positioned to defend against Japanese attacks. In October 1942, the Japanese launched their most ferocious offensive yet. They committed an entire regiment, roughly 3,000 soldiers, to break through the Marine lines and retake Henderson Field. The area where John Basilone's unit was positioned would later be called Coffin Corner. That should tell you everything you need to know. Chapter 5. The Night That Made a Legend. October 24th, 1942, just after 10 p.m. The attack began. The Japanese came screaming out of the jungle, thousands of them. They charged the Marine positions in waves, some carrying rifles, some carrying swords, all determined to break through. Sergeant John Basilone was in charge of 2 machine gun sections.
His men opened fire, cutting down Japanese soldiers as they charged, but the Japanese kept coming and coming and coming. Mortar shells began falling on the Marine positions. Grenades exploded. The noise was deafening. The chaos was overwhelming. One of John's machine gun sections took a direct hit from a mortar. The gun crew was wiped out. Only 2 men survived, both wounded. John grabbed the gun and moved it to a new position. Under continuous enemy fire, he repaired the damaged weapon and got it back into action. But now he had a problem. With one gun crew dead and another severely depleted, John didn't have enough men to operate both guns effectively. So John Basilone did something that sounds insane. He decided he would fire both guns himself. He'd fire one until the barrel got too hot, then switch to the other while the first cooled down. For hours, Sergeant John Basilone manned those machine guns, alone, while Japanese soldiers charged his position, while mortars exploded around him, while the jungle erupted in fire and death. PFC Nash Phillips, a Marine who witnessed John's actions that night, later said, "Basilone had a machine gun on the go for 3 days and nights, without sleep, rest, or food. He was in a good emplacement and causing the Japanese lots of trouble, not only firing his machine gun, but also using his pistol. 3 days and nights, without sleep, without food, just John Basilone and his machine guns holding the line." Chapter 6. The Ammunition Run. Then disaster struck. John's ammunition ran out. He was firing both machine guns, burning through belts of ammunition at an incredible rate. The supply lines were cut. There was no way to get more ammunition through the Japanese lines. He had a choice. He could fall back, abandon his position, let the Japanese break through, or he could do something that had almost no chance of success. John chose the latter. Leaving his wounded comrades to hold the position, John Basilone grabbed as much empty ammunition belts and cans as he could, and ran. 150 yards through Japanese-controlled jungle, in the dark, while the battle raged around him. Japanese soldiers fired at him. He fired back with his pistol. He dodged, he weaved, he fought his way through enemy territory like a man possessed. Somehow, miraculously, John made it to the ammunition supply point. He loaded up with as much ammunition as one man could physically carry, easily over 100 pounds of machine gun belts. Then he ran back, 150 yards through enemy lines, again, carrying over 100 pounds of ammunition. He made it. John Basilone returned to his position, reloaded his machine guns, and resumed firing. For the rest of that endless night, John Basilone held his position. When one gun overheated, he switched to the other. When ammunition ran low, he made another run through enemy lines to resupply. When the sun finally rose on October 25th, the battle was over. The Japanese attack had been broken. The Marines held Henderson Field. And when the Marines counted the enemy dead in front of John Basilone's position, they stopped counting at 38. 38 Japanese soldiers killed by one Marine sergeant. Some estimates say the actual number was much higher. Chapter 7. The Medal of Honor. When John's commanding officer, the legendary Lieutenant Colonel Louis Chesty Puller, heard what John Basilone had done, he immediately recommended him for the Medal of Honor. The paperwork was filed, witnesses gave their statements, the facts were undeniable. Sergeant John Basilone had single-handedly held a critical defensive position against overwhelming odds. His actions had saved Henderson Field and possibly prevented a Japanese breakthrough that could have changed the entire course of the Guadalcanal campaign. On May 21, 1943, in a ceremony in Melbourne, Australia, Major General Alexander Vandergrift presented Sergeant John Basilone with the Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration. John was the first enlisted Marine in World War II to receive the Medal of Honor. The first, but not the last. When John received the medal, he reportedly said, "Only part of this medal belongs to me. Pieces of it belong to the boys who are still on Guadalcanal." That was John Basilone, humble, loyal to his brothers, never seeking glory for himself. But the Marine Corps and the United States government had other plans for John. They wanted to use him. They needed a hero. They needed someone to inspire the American public, to sell war bonds, to remind people why they were fighting. In June 1943, John Basilone was sent home to the United States. He was taken off the front lines and put on a national publicity tour.
Chapter 8. The Hero Who Wanted to Fight. John Basilone became a celebrity overnight. His face appeared in newspapers across the country. He was invited to movie premieres in Hollywood. Beautiful actresses wanted to meet him. Crowds gathered wherever he went. The war bond tours took John to cities across America. He'd stand on stages wearing his Medal of Honor and urge Americans to buy war bonds to support the troops. Millions of dollars were raised thanks to John's efforts. The Marine Corps offered John a commission. They wanted to make him an officer, to promote him and assign him as an instructor at a training base back home. Safe, comfortable, far from the war. John refused. "I'm just a plain soldier and want to stay one," John said. "I ain't no officer and I ain't no museum piece. There are lots of guys depending on me to get them out of trouble." John Basilone wanted to go back to the war. He wanted to fight alongside his brothers. The publicity tours, the celebrity, the safety of the home front, none of it interested him. He requested to return to combat. The Marine Corps denied his request. They argued he was more valuable on the home front, raising money and morale. John requested again. Denied. He was frustrated, almost desperate to return to the fight. But the Marine Corps wouldn't budge. They needed their hero at home, not risking his life on some distant battlefield. Then, something happened that changed everything. Chapter 9. Love in the Middle of War. In July 1944, while John was stationed at Camp Pendleton in California for training, he met a woman named Lena Mae Riggy. She was a sergeant in the Marine Corps Women's Reserve, a smart, beautiful, strong woman who wasn't intimidated by John's fame or his Medal of Honor. They fell in love. Fast, intense, wartime love. The kind of love that happens when people know tomorrow isn't guaranteed. On July 10th, 1944, just days after meeting, John Basilone and Lena Mae Riggy were married at St. Mary's Star of the Sea Church in Oceanside, California. It was a small ceremony, intimate, beautiful. John was the happiest he had been since before the war. He had found someone who understood him, who loved him for who he was, not for the medal around his neck. But John's happiness was bittersweet, because he had finally gotten what he'd been requesting for months. The Marine Corps approved his return to combat. John Basilone was going back to war. Lena begged him not to go. She argued that he'd already done his duty, more than his duty. He'd earned the Medal of Honor. He'd helped raise millions for the war effort. He'd done enough. He could stay home. They could have a life together after the war. But John couldn't. His brothers were still fighting. Men were still dying. He felt like a coward sitting at home while Marines his age were bleeding and dying on Pacific Islands. John promised Lena he'd come back. He promised they'd have a life together after the war. A house, kids, the American dream. In December 1944, John shipped out. He was assigned to Company C, 1st Battalion, 27th Marine Regiment, 5th Marine Division. Destination?
Iwo Jima. Chapter 10. The Black Sand Island. Iwo Jima, a tiny volcanic island, barely 8 square miles, located 750 miles south of Tokyo. The island was strategically vital. It had airfields that the Americans needed for their B-29 bombers to reach mainland Japan. The Japanese knew this. They had turned Iwo Jima into a fortress. Thousands of soldiers, hundreds of artillery pieces, machine gun bunkers, tunnels, caves. Every inch of the island was a death trap. The American invasion was scheduled for February 19, 1945. Over 70,000 Marines would hit those beaches. Military planners predicted heavy casualties. They had no idea how bad it actually would be. On the morning of February 19, 1945, Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone stood on a landing craft heading toward Iwo Jima's shores. He was now a machine gun section leader, responsible for multiple gun crews. As the landing craft approached Red Beach 2, John could see the island. Black volcanic sand, steep cliffs, Mount Suribachi looming in the distance, smoke from naval bombardment. It looked like hell. It was hell. Chapter 11. The Last Battle. The landing craft hit the beach. The ramp dropped. John Basilone and his Marines charged onto Iwo Jima. Immediately all hell broke loose. Unlike Guadalcanal, where the landing had been relatively unopposed, Iwo Jima was a nightmare from the first second. The Japanese had held their fire during the naval bombardment, waiting for the Marines to land. Now they unleashed everything. Artillery, mortars, machine guns, rifle fire. The beach became a killing ground. Marines fell by the dozens. Landing craft were destroyed. Bodies littered the black sand. John's unit was pinned down almost immediately. Japanese machine gun fire from fortified bunkers was cutting the Marines to pieces. They couldn't advance. They couldn't retreat. They were trapped on the beach. Someone needed to do something. Someone needed to take out those bunkers. That someone was John Basilone. He rallied his machine gun sections. He organized suppression fire. Then, under a storm of enemy bullets, John moved around the flank of the Japanese positions until he was directly behind one of the heavily fortified bunkers. Getting one of his Marines to provide covering fire, John attacked the bunker alone. He threw grenades through the firing slits. He used satchel charges. He directed a Marine with a flamethrower to burn out the position. Single-handedly, John Basilone destroyed the entire bunker.
But John wasn't done. His unit was now moving toward Airfield No. 1, one of the key objectives on Iwo Jima. As they advanced, they encountered another problem. An American tank was trapped in a Japanese minefield. Artillery and mortar fire was raining down on it. The tank crew was stuck, unable to move forward or backward without hitting a mine. John saw this. He ran toward the tank. While explosions rocked the ground around him, while bullets snapped past his head, John Basilone guided that tank to safety. Step by step, yard by yard, he led the tank through the minefield. The tank made it to safety. John turned to continue leading his men forward. And that's when a Japanese mortar shell exploded near him. Shrapnel tore through John Basilone's body. He died instantly. He was 28 years old. Chapter 12. The Legacy of Manila John. For his actions on Iwo Jima, Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone was posthumously awarded the Navy Cross, the second highest military decoration for valor in the U.S. military. John Basilone became the only enlisted Marine in World War II to receive both the Medal of Honor and the Navy Cross, the only one. Out of hundreds of thousands of Marines who served, John alone earned both of America's highest combat decorations. His body was initially buried in a makeshift grave on Iwo Jima.
In April 1948, at his family's request, John's remains were recovered and reburied at Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia. His widow, Lena Mae Basilone, never remarried. She wore her wedding ring for the rest of her life. When she died on July 11, 1999, at the age of 86, she was still wearing that ring. She was buried at Riverside National Cemetery in California, faithful to John's memory for 54 years. Chapter 14. Remembering the Hero. Today, John Basilone's legacy lives on in ways both large and small. On December 21, 1945, the Navy destroyer USS Basilone was commissioned and christened by John's widow, Lena. In 2022, a second ship, the guided missile destroyer USS John Basilone, was commissioned in his honor. In November 2005, the U.S. Postal Service issued a stamp bearing John's likeness. Streets, buildings, bridges, and schools across America bear his name. Every September, Raritan, New Jersey, John's hometown, holds a parade in his honor. Veterans, active-duty military, and civilians gather to remember the local boy who became a national hero. In 2010, HBO produced the miniseries The Pacific, which depicted John Basilone's story alongside two other Marines. The series introduced a new generation to Manila John and his incredible courage. John's Medal of Honor and Navy Cross are now exhibited at the National Museum of the Marine Corps, where visitors can see them and learn about the man who earned them. So what can we learn from John Basilone? What does his story tell us about courage, about duty, about sacrifice? First, John's story teaches us that heroes come from ordinary places. John wasn't born into wealth or privilege. He was the sixth of 10 children in an Italian immigrant family. He dropped out of school at 15. He worked as a caddy and a truck driver. There was nothing in his background that predicted he would become one of the greatest Marines in history. But when war came, John stepped up. He proved that greatness isn't about where you come from, it's about who you choose to be. Second, John's story teaches us about loyalty. After earning the Medal of Honor, John could have stayed home. He could have accepted a safe assignment as an instructor. He could have lived comfortably, celebrated as a hero, and never fired another shot in anger. But John didn't do that. He went back. He went back because his brothers were still fighting, still dying. He couldn't live with himself knowing he was safe while they were in danger. That's loyalty. That's brotherhood. That's the Marine Corps motto, Semper Fidelis, always faithful. Third, John's story teaches us about sacrifice. John knew the risks. He'd seen combat. He'd seen friends die. He knew that going back to the war meant he might not come home. But John went anyway, because some things are more important than personal safety. Some causes are worth dying for. Freedom, country, brothers in arms. John Basilone didn't just talk about sacrifice, he lived it, and ultimately, he gave his life for it. Let me take you back to that beach on Iwo Jima. February 19th, 1945. Black volcanic sand. Japanese fire pouring down from the cliffs. Marines pinned down, bleeding, dying. You're a gunnery sergeant. You've already earned the Medal of Honor. You could be home right now, safe with your new wife. But instead, you're here, in hell, because this is where you're needed. A bunker is killing your Marines. Someone has to take it out. That someone is you. You attack that bunker alone. You destroy it. You save your brothers. You guide a tank to safety. You keep advancing, keep fighting, keep leading. And then a mortar shell explodes near him. And in an instant, it's over. That was John Basilone's last day, a day of extraordinary heroism, a day that earned him the Navy Cross, a day that cost him his life. John Basilone could have survived World War II. He could have grown old with Lena. He could have had children, grandchildren. He could have lived a long, peaceful life. But John didn't choose the easy path. He chose duty. He chose his brothers. He chose to go back to war when he didn't have to. And because of that choice, because of John Basilione's sacrifice and the sacrifice of hundreds of thousands like him, we live free today. Remember his name, John Basilone, Manila John, November 4th, 1916 to February 19th, 1945. The only Marine in World War II to earn both the Medal of Honor and the Navy Cross. American hero. American legend. United States Marine. And remember his words. Only part of this medal belongs to me. Pieces of it belong to the boys who are still on Guadalcanal. That was John Basilone. Humble, loyal, brave beyond measure. Semper Fidelis, Gunnery Sergeant. Semper Fidelis.